Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Florida-friendly landscaping program. I have a guest with me today. I'm the Florida-friendly landscaping program coordinator from Pasco County, Frank Galdo. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you for having me here. Glad to be here.
I am Lilly Browning. I do work for Hernando County Utilities here in Hernando County as the Florida-friendly landscaping program coordinator. My email is LillyB, Lillyb at hernandocounty.us. If you'd like a PDF copy of this pre-recorded program, just email me and I'll be glad to send it to you. Also, Frank will email me a PDF of his portion and I'll be glad to send that to you as well. Here are the 9 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping. Everything Frank and I do in our work life and usually even beyond is promoting one or more of these landscaping principles. So today we're going to probably number 1, right plant, right place is what we're going to cover a lot, but we also, all those others kind of sneak in there too. So I know it doesn't feel like fall to anybody here on September 13th, but it's coming. And I have been in Florida 43 years. Frank, I think you've been here a while too, haven't you?
On and off, yeah, on and off since early 2000s.
Okay. So I've got you by, twice. I've probably been here longer than you've been alive. But anyway, once you're here a while, fall never does slap you in the face with its gorgeousness like it does up north. It's not something you can step out the door and know immediately unless you're in tune, with basically the nature of Florida. You can start to feel it in very subtle ways. I notice it first off by the angle of the sun. And you come kind of in tune with that, oh yeah, fall is coming. Of course, Frank and I notice it with the different wildflowers that are blooming. Of course, it gets darker sooner. And eventually, maybe mid-October-ish or so, you will also notice a difference in the humidity. These things happen.
Thank goodness.
You can tell, yes, it's beginning to feel like fall. And I do say that, with a little bit of, don't think I don't run up north every fall. Okay, let's just put it that way. I do have family up there. So, October is a great time to visit. And I'll be in a cabin in Tennessee part of this October too. But since we live in Florida, let's also enjoy the seasons that are in Florida because they are real, they do exist. But let's talk about, what says fall to many of us. And that is, when the leaves change color. We do have some deciduous leaves here in Florida that will change color, but generally that's probably January or so when they change color. But what makes that happen up north is when chlorophyll production drops in the cooler weather. And so the leaves aren't filled up with, green. So what happens in Florida is our high temperatures don't allow the chlorophyll levels to drop that significantly, at least not in the fall time that we're used to. Like I said, you can see some good fall color after Christmas, usually when we've had a frost or two, and usually in very wet areas. That's just anecdotally where I have noticed it. So what do? We want fall color. So, that coloring usually starts up north, depending on where up north, but October is the time when everyone runs to the mountains or wherever to see this beautiful color. And Florida is still dealing with 80s and 90s and maybe morning lows under 70 early to mid-October. So we can start to get a little bit of color in mid-November and just like up north, some years are better than others. If you're honest with yourself, you can remember there were some so-so falls as far as color goes up north, you know, just like anywhere else. But this is what we remember. This is what we think about, you know, that beautiful sunny day. We took a ride in October. I'm getting myself excited now about going up to the mountains, and just saw, you know, just utter gorgeousness. And that's kind of, you know, the good times usually stick in our minds. But why are we here? Why are we living in Florida? Because you know, if we're going to be honest, we need to remember everything. Where I came from, even though I was a child when I came to Florida, where I came from in Pittsburgh has something like less than 200 sunny days a year. Yeah. So, you know, there's a reason we're here in sunny Florida. So let's make the best of where we are. So even though we're not going to have exactly the kind of fall that they have up north with the crisp sweater weather and the, you know, drinking hot apple cider and all that, there you can create the feeling of fall. And there are a few trees that we have, and we're going to cover those. But there are many foliage plants to substitute, sometimes even year round, that can bring that color. So what we need to do is be creative. First of all, we need to be intuitive to be in tune with what brings the seasons in Florida. And, you know, then we need to improvise and be creative and bring that fall colored look, maybe in, you know, different ways. Think outside of the box through non-traditional plantings. And what I think Frank is going to cover is looking to nature, because Florida does have fall. There's some fall color right behind me. That's one way that we can find some Florida fall color as well. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and allow Frank to start sharing his portion of Florida fall.
All right, thank you very much. And yeah,
Thank
I'll
you.
go ahead and get my screen right up here. Okay. Is that looking good? Excellent. All right. So yes, I am really thrilled to be talking about Florida fall color, because fall in Florida is absolutely one of my favorite times of year. Humidity, like Lilly was saying, just drops right off. The rain lets up. It's that great time to be outside. And in addition to that perfect sort of weather that we get, I really, really enjoy the seasonal changes. And yes, we do have seasonal changes in Florida. And, you know, once you start to get in tune with them, you can actually pick up on all these cues, and you can get that same sort of wonderful anticipation that's part of the fun of the changing seasons too, where you're eagerly awaiting those first hints of color, those first buds forming and things like that. And, you know, starting to associate all those things of, you know, memories of different times of year and different events in your life with what plants were doing what at that time. You know, for me, that's entirely here in Florida, just as much as it is with the seasonal colors up north. It is different here. It's a little bit more of like a subtle wash of watercolor paints, as opposed to maybe just like a really bold oil paint abstract or something. So in terms of that, I really hope that if you don't think Florida has seasons and you've heard all those jokes and everything, that we can change your mind a little bit today. All right, so like Lilly mentioned, I'm Frank Galdo. I'm one of the program coordinators here in Pasco County, which is just south of Hernando. And yeah, we work on a lot of the same sort of issues, getting information out there to help you work smarter, not harder in your landscape, saving water, right plant, right place, all those different things. And, you know, we're getting information out there all sorts of different ways. So hopefully you're tuning in on a regular basis to these wonderful webinars. You're checking out all the blogs and different information we put out there. And I can be found on all these wonderful platforms. Now I'm going to jump right into it, talking about the fact that, like Lily mentioned, some of our fall color here in Florida doesn't actually necessarily come just strictly from leaves, like up north. So a lot of our fall color actually kicks off at the beginning end of the season with a wonderful parade of wildflowers. And once you start to recognize them, you can see that it just transitions from one to another and pretty much carries you through the new year. It's a really fantastic sort of thing. It kicks off, in my mind, with the blooming of spotted bee balm or dotted horseman, Monarda punctata. This is a plant that's actually in the same family as mint and thyme and oregano. And actually the leaves have a really strong pungent oregano sort of aroma and smell, flavor, if you give them like a little scratch and sniff. But where they really get spectacular is right around the point where kids are going back to school. They will put up these spikes of lavender and white bracts, which are modified leaves. So the parts there that you're seeing that are drooping down, those are actually modified leaves similar to poinsettias and things like that. And the flowers are tucked in between. And the flowers will attract every sort of pollinator imaginable, including bees and wasps and things that you don't even see for the rest of the year. They will come out just for these. So pretty spectacular. One thing to keep in mind with plants like this, and this goes into the concept of right plant, right place, is these can get big and leggy while they're getting up to that blooming size. So depending on your growing conditions, you may even need to stake them up for a little bit of extra support. They may not necessarily be the sort of thing to put in the front of a formal landscape and things like that. And they are an annual, so they pretty much reseed each year. Occasionally they'll survive through the year and come back from woody stock. But yeah, it's right plant, right place, kind of understanding what it's going to look like at different points. So you're going to have points where it's just all greenery, points where it's these seed heads, which could be a fun architectural kind of addition to a landscape, or could make for some nice decorations. But it only looks like this for a small part of the year. So it's one of those things that sometimes you have to tread with caution with these sort of things, because you'll often see the picture during that point in the year where it looks really good and nobody ever mentions the other parts. So I always like to kind of highlight all of that, and never hurts to ask us questions about that sort of thing. That's what we're here for, is give a little bit of that info. Now, the bee balm really kind of kicks off a whole procession of tall fall purple wildflowers, and pollinators really just zip through the season, one to another, from the liatris and the false foxgloves and the elephantopus, which is having a fantastic year this year. And all of these different ones will just bring in all sorts of pollinator action to your landscape, bringing it to life and giving a little bit of interesting accent to whatever garden goals you've got going on. Similarly, some of the other things that really add color that aren't your traditional trees, but are fantastic additions in a Florida landscape, are things like muley grass and some of our other ornamental grasses. So you really can't include a list of Florida fall color without thinking about these sort of things. You've got pretty much something for every kind of soil condition and growing condition, from small spaces and single plants to mass plantings and just spectacular washes of color. What I love about things like these muley grasses and other ornamental grasses is that you get not only the color, but there's also that textural component of the movement and just the backlit, the way the sun kind of comes through it at different angles, the way the dew sometimes sits on it and just makes it look like a magical cloud in the morning. You really can't beat this kind of stuff for just giving that magical sense of place and time. I know Lily, you and I have kind of talked about muley grass and Elliot's love grass and the purple love grass and all the wonderful ways these can add to a landscape. There's even a white version of muley grass, harder to find, but can add sort of an interesting, similar texture and everything, but maybe pink's not your color, or it doesn't fit with your landscape goals and things like that. So, let's see. Now, quick public service announcement. When it comes to muley grass and some of these other ornamentals, they can get fairly substantial in size throughout the growing season. A lot of people don't really fully appreciate how big some of these will get. And so by the end of a summer, a good, healthy, mature clump of muley grass can be a good 3, 4, 5 feet across sometimes if it's really happy. And each year, just as the big fall show is about to begin, there are unfortunate tufts of muley grass that will get chopped down in their prime and turned into this mangled mess that just tortures my soul, where it looks like something you should scrape your boots on. And, I just look at this and I'm like, no, because often this is happening, again, right plant, right place. It was planted too close to the walkway or too close to the curb, and now it's interfering with traffic or just, causing problems. And people are kind of in a tough position. They've got to maintain the walkways, or you've got to be able to open your car door. But what happens when you do this right now at this point in the year is it's not going to have time to regrow and look nice before the big fall show. And often you're going to have it poking up just a few random pink feathers and looking kind of like a plucked flamingo instead of the glorious, cloud of pink that it should be. And it's going to look like that all winter long too. So, the saying goes, timing is everything. That definitely goes with pruning your ornamental grasses. This is the time of year to let them do their thing. And, honestly, if it's too close to the walkway, remember that in the late winter or early spring, dig it up and divide it then. If you really absolutely had to chop it in half this year right now, don't leave it there till next year to do the same thing. Dig it up, move it, divide it when it's dormant, late winter, early spring, just before the new flush growth. And that's going to be your little public service announcement to prevent muley mutilation, which I just saw some the other day and I was like, no. Now, talking about fall wildflowers, Florida is basically all about purples and yellows. So during the summer, we get all sorts of reds, all sorts of yellows and goldens and, a wide variety. Fall, it really starts to hone in on attracting all the attention of the last pollinators out there with the last rays of UV and whatnot. Yellow and purple is where it's at. And so some of these can be really, really stunning in large plantings, like these narrow leaf sunflowers, swamp sunflowers, which, like the name suggests, they want to be in a little bit of a wetter spot. But yeah, if you have a retention area or you have a wetland nearby or just a wet area in your yard, things like this can be absolutely stunning. Now, if you don't have wet conditions or you've got a mix of conditions, there's pretty much something for just about any type of growing area and any size that you've got. We've got beautiful goldenrods, there's sennas, all sorts of different things that can add that splash of yellow in just about any size package you're looking for. Full disclosure, the picture on the left there was actually up near Salem, Massachusetts a couple of years ago. There was this fantastic, well-designed rain garden. Kind of, it was a little bit more substantial than a rain garden, kind of cross between rain garden and stormwater control structure or something. But it was designed to take all the runoff from a parking lot and filter it before it could go and wash out to sea. And it featured this spectacular mixture of native milkweeds that were starting to go to seed at that point, and wildflowers and grasses, and these fantastic plumes of goldenrod were just covered in pollinators. And I thought that was a really great example of how things like stormwater structures and wet areas can, not only be functional, but really beautiful and serve pollinator benefits and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, there are ways to bring all that color in and have seasonal color, but not necessarily in the traditional way we think of it. Now, that's not to say that we don't have some trees that do have some color. And like Lily mentioned, some of these actually tend to fall more towards the later end of our fall season and even early winter. And it really depends on the weather and the temperature and the cold snaps. The one that I chose to include in here today was turkey oak. And the reason I picked it is it doesn't get nearly the appreciation that it deserves. You know, often we think about things like maples and other hardwoods when it comes to some of our fall color, but turkey oak is one of the few of the broadleaf oaks that we have this far south. A lot of the other oaks that we have are more like the live oaks and the laurel oaks. They pretty much hold their green leaves all the way until the spring when they drop them almost overnight, and then they flush out their new growth. And I call it kind of their fall spring trick that they do. You know, they practically just drop them all overnight. Everybody's dealing with these piles of oak leaves. And, you know, we do have a few like the turkey oak, gives some nice fall color. So giving it a little shout out. Other trees that have some red foliage like maples and sweetgums really do prefer the wetter locations here in Florida. You'll find them naturally growing and thriving on the edge of wetlands, just outside the periphery of where the cypress grow and things like that. So, you know, turkey oak can give you that option in the dry areas. And that's one of the things that I actually really like about it, is that it's honestly somewhat of an indicator species because it's not planted intentionally very often. When you find turkey oaks, it pretty much means that you've got a very specific type of habitat. You've got a very well-drained, nutrient-poor, acidic soil that's characteristic of habitats that maybe haven't been quite as impacted by development and things like that. And so when you find it, it can give you clues as to what else might thrive there, or what things might not thrive there, even more importantly. And so again, right plant, right place. If you see turkey oaks in your neighborhood, maybe along the roadsides and things like that, that can give you a really good clue that you've actually got some specific habitat constraints and maybe some options that might not be available to other folks that have more wet, you know, inundated landscapes. The best time of year to really look for them
Frank,
is, this time of year.
You are speaking to everyone in my neighborhood, just letting you know that.
Exactly.
Northwestern portion of Hernando County, it's Sand Hill, and you know that we've got plenty of turkey oaks. So you're right, that's a great indicator species of what can grow, what we should try, you know, or when to not try. So.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's one of those things. There are things like that that once you recognize them can honestly allow you to read your landscape. And I remember you did a great program a while back about how even some of the weeds that pop up in your landscape can allow you to read into the underlying conditions and things like that. Similarly, you know, there are plants like turkey oak where once you recognize them, they're pretty unmistakable and they tell you a lot about where you are. And that I find, you know, both a beautiful thing in terms of the guidance that it can give you for your landscape design and stuff, but also that sense of place. You know, this is a plant that's found here and not there. You know, there's a very specific thing to kind of embrace with that. And I love it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and really just totally switch it up here just for fun and talk a little bit about edible fall color for a landscape, because one of my favorite things about the transition into fall and winter is that it is the peak time for edible landscaping here in Florida. So everybody else kind of gets their peak in summer and they're, you know, up north and harvesting, you know, zucchinis the size of Chihuahua or, you know, whatnot. And, you know, here in Florida, it's all about fall and winter. And one of my favorite things to grow is very colorful, and it peaks in the point right around October and November. It's roselle. This is sometimes called sorrel in the Caribbean. It's gotten different names all around the world. It's used to make jams and jellies and, you know, even chutneys and things like mock cranberry sauce. It is fantastically tart. It's the main contribution to things like hibiscus tea. And it's actually not the flower that's used, but it's the part at the base of the flower. You can see it there in the picture on the left. There is basically a juicy, tart set of calyxes that this plant produces that is the source for the ingredient for the jams and teas and all that stuff. It makes a wonderful festive drink in the Caribbean with different seasonal spices like cinnamon or cloves. And it's just a really great seasonal flavor for me. I lived in the Caribbean for a while, and so this just means the holidays. And it's a beautiful plant. It's in the okra and hibiscus family, so you can see the flower is actually pretty attractive there. So yeah, this is actually an annual plant. You plant it around April, May from seeds. And by this point in the year, you should have some nice bushy plants that may even need to be staked up a bit because the tall stalks can get a little bit top heavy in some of our summertime windstorms and things like that. But yeah, you can get quite a wonderful harvest, enough that I usually wind up having some to process and freeze for later on. I'm still working off of last year's harvest. It was pretty successful. So yeah, there are an enormous range of options when it comes to colorful edibles to incorporate into your landscape. And edible landscaping is really gaining a lot of popularity, especially as the availability of some of this stuff increases, and our amount of time to spend in our gardens over the past year with some of the circumstances has increased. Fall and winter are a great time to get into this and give it a try. You've got red mustard greens and purple basils and all sorts of different colors and textures of lettuces and kales, and some of our herbs like dill. These things really add some amazing color and let you eat the rainbow all through the winter season. So FFL program has recently actually put out some publications specifically on edible landscaping, because it is becoming more and more something that we're asked about. And, we want to make sure that we're giving some good tips and educational information about how to get you started. So contact your local FFL or extension programs, and we're happy to kind of point you in the right direction. All right. Now, next plant that I wanted to highlight, it's got salt in the name, but it is not an edible. This is kind of going back to the ornamental side of things. This is a plant called saltbush, and I'm kind of working through the arc of fall into winter. This one usually waits until about Thanksgiving to really start putting on a show. And right around that point, it starts to bring a lot of questions to our offices as people see this just lighting up on roadsides, and they're trying to figure out, what it is that looks like it's all of a sudden, dusted in snow out there. This is a plant that's tolerant of soggy conditions. You'll typically find it in roadside swales, along the edges of stormwater structures and ponds and wetlands. It's not necessarily something for every small yard, but in certain situations, if you've got some of those wetter areas, this can absolutely add some seasonal interest, pollinator benefits, all that kind of stuff. So it's an interesting plant. There's actually different male and female flowers. The male ones are on the left side there. The female ones are a little bit fluffier and whiter. So yeah, saltbush, definitely an interesting one. Once you start to recognize it and keep an eye out for it, you'll really see it everywhere. Now, along the same lines of plants that might not necessarily have a place in a small landscape, but in certain settings can definitely bring some fall and winter color. Some of our larger sprawling native vines that are in the grape family can add some really amazing fall color and don't get the appreciation they deserve. So Virginia creeper is one, which doesn't get appreciation, because often it gets mistaken for poison ivy, which it's not. Virginia creeper has the leaves in sets of 5 there. It's got berries that are an interesting shade of blue and loved by wildlife. The pollinators actually love the flowers that are kind of subtle. They don't really bring a lot of interest, but There are pollinators that specifically seek those out. So it's got a lot of wildlife benefit. And then in terms of the fall color, honestly, nothing beats the crimson intensity that that Virginia creeper can get in the right conditions. Similar, the yellow that you can get out of muscadine vines when they are really happy and growing well is pretty impressive. And definitely both of these need room to wander. They're not something to just willy-nilly introduce into a tiny landscape, but something to consider if you've got larger areas, or sometimes people see these growing and they're concerned that they're invasive because they can really sprawl and take over. These are native plants. They both have wildlife value and some seasonal color. Now, you may notice that most of the muscadine vines that you see don't actually produce muscadine grapes. And this is a fun little trivia fact for you. Muscadine vines in the wild are generally either male or female. And the vast majority, I may be misquoting this, but I want to say like somewhere up around 90% of the muscadine vines out there are actually male vines. So they produce only pollen in tiny, tiny little flowers that you will never even notice. So if you want muscadines to actually eat, go ahead and find yourself a named cultivar that's going to be a female or a hybrid plant that can produce without a pollinator. Lots of UF work to develop those sort of things. So, yeah. All right. Now, another plant that really can bring some interesting fall color sometimes is firebush. Now, a lot of times when we're thinking about firebush, we think about the bright red flowers and the pollinators that it attracts. But some of these types, especially some of the true native cultivars like Calusa and some of the ones with larger leaves, get a wonderful sort of red tint to the leaves in the fall. And you couple that with these ripening berries that turn from a bright red to like a juicy black. If the birds don't eat them first, this can really add some nice seasonal color there, depending on the weather conditions. Now, if it gets cold enough, firebush will actually just drop its leaves or die all the way back to the ground in some situations. So especially as you approach this central Florida line, south of us here, firebush tends to be evergreen and will sometimes reach some pretty impressive proportions that you won't tend to see it get, except in very sheltered microclimates as you get like further north of here. But it tends to respring from the roots as a root hardy if it does die back. All right. Oops. So another plant that likewise can get some spectacular red to burgundy sort of fall color to the leaves is sparkleberry. And this is a little bit less of a well-known one. It's, again, one that you find more in natural areas, but it's increasingly got some interest in landscape uses, increasingly available too. It's a cousin of blueberries. It's actually being pursued right now from some of the UF research to look at it as potentially a grafting rootstock or a genetic component to making some more hardy blueberries for here. Kind of a little interesting side note, but yeah, it's naturally found around here in sandy flatwoods and forests that have low nutrients, acidic soils, kind of similar to turkey oak. And it's often included in a lot of the FFL plant selection guides. And this is the reason why. These were actually taken in December, and it's actually got berries that can be eaten by wildlife. It's flowering as one of the earliest of the flowering members of the blueberry family that produces some flowers for the rare pollinator that's up and active at that point in the year. And it can get this wonderful, wonderful, intense sort of burgundy color to those leaves. Now, I say potentially get that color because it's really adaptable to different light conditions, and it grows happily in full sun or as an understory plant in forests that have been a little bit burn suppressed, fire suppressed. It can grow kind of as an under canopy kind of plant. And the fall color depends a lot on some of those growing conditions. So it really seems that the intensity of the cold snaps that it's exposed to and the intensity of the sun really influence how much of that burgundy you get versus staying more kind of a orangey or even evergreen. So again, this is one of those interesting plants. It extends that arc of seasonal color right in through honestly early and midwinter, and can bring some good wildlife benefits. Be a good plant for some difficult to grow locations like dry, sandy, acidic, nutrient poor soils. And it's just underutilized and a kind of interesting plant there. That photo on the left is actually one of the more well-decorated gopher tortoise burrows that I know of here in Pasco County. And they do seem to sort of self-seed some of the fruits that they like to eat and flowers and things like that. And you'll find gopher tortoise burrows a lot of times decorated pretty spectacularly during the fall. One of those things I've joked about, we should have a best gopher tortoise burrow decoration contest or something like that. But, all right, so other extreme in terms of conditions, that was a plant that thrives in some pretty sandy, dry sort of stuff. This is a plant that thrives in some mucky and wet locations, sort of opposite end of the spectrum. Climbing Astr, and this is possibly one of my favorites in terms of just that seasonal anticipation and just the amazingness that this plant contains. It's one of the last of those fall purple wildflowers to bloom. It doesn't even really get started until sometime in November, but then it really keeps on going right until about the new year or even a little bit afterwards sometimes. It'll have hundreds of these little lilac colored flowers, and the scent is just incredible. The scent of climbing asters when they're hit by the sun and warmed up like that is like vanilla sugar cookies or something like that. It's this wafting smell that's just wonderful, and it draws in every pollinator from miles around. You name it. There will be little bees, big bees, green bees, honeybees, butterflies, bumblebees, you name it, you're going to see it hanging out around the climbing asters. And it is just, it's a spectacular plant if you have the right conditions to have something that's kind of large and sprawling and enjoy a little bit of wet feet. Now, I'm kind of doing an experiment where for the last couple of years, I've been training it up a trellis, and it doesn't actually climb with tendrils or anything like that. So it takes a little bit of weaving the stems in and selective pruning and things like that, but been having some pretty good luck with it. And it does really nicely on a setting like that, if you can give it a little extra maintenance. All right. So quick tip in terms of designing for seasonal changes and things to keep in mind is that a lot of generic landscape plants that you'll see around are chosen because they pretty much look the same year round. They're going to look the same in December that they do in July. And, often when we've got plants that have seasonal peaks, there are things to know about them where they're going to have a different aspect in the landscape in the spring versus the fall. And they're going to have different pruning needs and timings that you'll want to be mindful of. So sometimes it's helpful to get some input from somebody who has experience with these to really know, like, what would I expect in my landscape at different points in the year? Is there a time where I want to avoid pruning this and things like that? And then you can plan accordingly, because often it makes a big difference in terms of what this is going to look like for you. So really nice example. This is a photo from a member of a Florida native plant gardening group. And he graciously allowed me to share this picture. This kind of shows what you can have at different points in the year. You can see the muley grass isn't really putting out its pink flare at that point. The Pityopsis, the silk grass from that last photo, it doesn't have the yellow flowers yet. It's just got these bluish green leaves. You got Coreopsis really peaking right here at this point in the year. And then things trade. And you're going to have Liatris shooting up those purple spikes that is now in this photo just hiding in the background. Muley grass is going to take over the show. There's different points where you can prune things back or let things come to the front as the star. So things to kind of consider. It takes a little bit of a different design and a different eye, different understanding, but you can make it work. You know, things like beautyberry, you'll want to time your pruning, make sure that you're not pruning away all your berries and things like that. But you can actually prevent these from getting leggy. You know, this might be how it looks in a natural setting, but those arrows there on the left, that's actually pruned beautyberry at the utilities building at Pasco County Utilities location in central Pasco. And they do still make berries, they do still flower, not quite as much as if they were unpruned, but your landscape aesthetics and needs can sometimes work with the natural tendencies of a plant to still get you know, the goals you're looking for and some good color. All right. Figured I would throw out there that there are a lot of plants that have seasonal color that I didn't even start to mention in here because you know, Lilly and I have done some programs talking about holiday sort of plants, and that's where I left some of the seasonal berries like rouge plant and wild coffee and things like that. So definitely, you know, take a look for those programs too, because there's a lot of things that overlap with a lot of these fall colors that I talked about, but tend more towards the red berries, things like that. And there's, you know, you can see there's so much for me to talk about, for both of us to talk about on these topics. We had to draw the line somewhere. So by all means, if you're interested in that sort of thing, check it out as well. And yeah, with that, I'm going to go ahead and quit yabbering and turn it over to Lilly. So thank you. And
I like listening to you. I always learn a lot when, even though we've even done this one in the past, we did this last year. And it was, we did it as a live show, but the recording didn't go all that well. The recording had technical issues, so that's why we're reviving it again. But even though, you know, so you've heard mine, I've heard your thing before, I still always learn. That's why I like to have guests, because, you know, I steal from your brains so that I can, you know, every time we learn from each other, we can help more people. And that's what, you know, that's what we're all here for.
oh, definitely. Each time we do one of these programs, I always find that the process of pulling it all together and the process of presenting it and hearing, you know, just brings even more ideas to it. So I always enjoy these.
We assign ourselves homework all the time and we learn
exactly
as well. Yes. So let me start on a few of, you know, few plants that will also bring color into your landscape. This persimmon, it also grows wild in the areas where I live, where the turkey oaks, where the turkey oaks grow. We need to write a book as to where the turkey oaks grow. We also, though, we have saltbush too. I was going to tell you that. So they also grow in very dry areas as well. These persimmons, they're always trying to come up. But if you have one, it can grow, you know, pretty tall. You need a lot of space for it. Up to 60 feet. It says makes a good small shade tree, but it will keep growing as it goes along. Will you not get a persimmon? You know, that depends on, I guess, how much you're looking out for it, because generally if you just want it out in your yard, the persimmons are for the wildlife, and you know, that's a good thing as well. Yeah, that's what it can look like there in the fall. This one, I have a conversation every single year because, you know, I work here at the water department. So in water conservation, our department is so huge, there's 2 of us. So I'm kind of mixed in with some engineers and with some finance people. Well, and we've got a beautiful big room with beautiful picture windows with a lovely view of some bald cypress. So every year, one of the finance gals tells me the bald cypress is dying. And every year I have to remind her, no, it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's called bald cypress for a reason. It's actually deciduous. And in the process of losing its leaves, it will turn this rust colored. And so, it brings on a lot of nice color. Now, you need, a good amount of space for 100 feet, 150 feet, loves the water, but doesn't have to be in the water. That's why I have these two different pictures. Cypress in the water, most likely, eventually, depending how deep in the water it is, you're going to get those knees. But you can plant a cypress tree up in a high dry area and it'll grow fine as well. Just won't put out those knees, which, you may appreciate when you're mowing that they're not there. So it has a lot of uses. Frank mentioned the Sweetgum. Only recently, in the past few years, have I seen people planting Sweetgum on purpose. That wasn't, it's kind of like turkey oaks. You're like, oh, all right. Actually, a gated community I noticed was putting Sweetgums in their backyard, and I was like, why? That's interesting, because I wouldn't think that in general people in gated communities would want one, because they produce these seed pods, which when my nephew was 3, he referred to them as ouchie balls. They're kind of spiky seed pods that you'd have to clean up. But I realized why they were planting them there is because that development was in a very wet area. Sweetgums do like it fairly wet. In a building we used to be in, the utilities department used to be in more in Brooksville itself, had a bunch of Sweetgum there. I'm sure they weren't planted. I'm sure they were left there when the building was built. But it made a very nice area to walk through, especially in the fall, because for those few seconds of walking through there and all the leaves, different colored leaves on the ground and stuff that you're walking through, you could say, yay, it's fall. So, and it kind of brings back those childhood memories. So it's something to consider, definitely Sweetgum. Crepe myrtle, if the conditions are right. And crepe myrtles aren't all that happy this year. So I'm going to wonder, are they going to give us colored leaves this year? Because they haven't given us much flowers this year in general. And I've heard other people say that too. And the reason, my guess, why we haven't got a tremendous amount of crepe myrtle flowering this year, like other years, is because of that rainless May that we had. So it will be interesting. I don't know whether that means they'll just drop their leaves and be done, or maybe they'll substitute and give us beautiful colored leaves. We'll have to wait and find out. Even if they don't, and when I say the colored leaves again, there usually needs to be a frost or so. Even if they don't, even if they just drop all their leaves off, leave those crepe myrtles alone to give us this beautiful bark. They have wonderful winter interest. And if we don't over prune them like this, and this is kind of, Frank's on the mission for the muley mutilation. I was thinking of combining those words, muliation or something. The University of Florida sometimes refers to this as crepe murder. This severe pruning, everybody does it because everybody does it. So they think it's the right thing to do. And it won't kill your plant right away, but it will shorten its life. You're taking all those starches and sugars, away. And when that grows back from that, you get basal cell new growth each time, really whippy, really long. They produce bigger flowers, but fewer, and you are shortening the life of that tree. Now, in some of the developments where you have businesses that have to go through and get things done in a certain amount of time, they're just going to take their chainsaws and zoom, 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 every January, February, and commit these atrocities here. But they think, oh, but it comes back and blooms every year. And does it really matter to them? Because they have a schedule, got to get things done. Does it matter to them that that tree that could have lasted 20 years is going to last 8 or 10? So, did you want to say something, Frank?
Well, I was going to jump in with, there is somebody in my neighborhood who has an absolutely spectacular crepe myrtle that's the opposite of this. It is the textbook example of if you use very light-handed selective pruning and treat this thing almost more the way that a really wonderful deciduous bonsai gets treated, where the leafless portion of the year is as valued, if not more, compared to the part where it's leafed out. They do have spectacular bark and that muscular, twisted sort of, tight trunk form. It's an amazing tree to look at like that, to the point that they actually have it lit up with, underlighting at night and things like that. And it looks amazing. And bonsai is just the immediate thing that comes to mind of, like, you would not go into a deciduous bonsai and just like do this to it and destroy the form. If you've got a tree that for half of the year, or at least a decent chunk of the year, is going to be leafless, make it look good during that time of the year too, if it can. So, yeah.
Right. And I
Public
always
service
say,
announcement.
thank you.
Yeah.
I always say those, when you continually cut it off, that pollardizing, it has a word for it. They do it to trees in Europe, but it should not necessarily be done, to the poor crepe myrtles. But they form, they form these, like ugly, bumps that, to me, I say they're like fists. Like, why? Why did you do this to me? That's what the tree kind of looks like. And Jim Davis is the Hernando County Extension Director, and he had 3 crepe myrtles that he decided to run an experiment with. So one of them he severely pruned. We also call that hat racking. Looks like you turned it into a hat rack. The other one he selectively pruned. He took out all the twiggy branches, removed crossing branches, just a little bit of cleaning up, took the suckers away. Third one, didn't touch it. What looked the best by the time summer came along? That middle one, that he did that selective, as you say, almost like bonsaiing, but almost selective pruning. And when we say bonsaiing, we got to be careful, because this goes back to right plant, right place. And the reason a lot of people cut these back is they're like, well, it's too big for the space. And the older ones, the white ones, the Natchez, they're going to grow. They're going to grow. Everything in their DNA wants them to be 40 feet tall. So you've got, a tree there. There's so many different dwarf varieties. If you want a crepe myrtle in a small space, look for those dwarf varieties.
Definitely.
Yes. And so that's I think we're good on the crepe myrtle talk there. Here's we can bring in some reds with this coral honeysuckle. It's a native vine, and it usually does well all through the fall and winter. This one is just so much better, so much hardier, so even prettier than our Japanese honeysuckle, which up north is a problem. It's an invasive, non-native up north. So it still gets looked at as, invasive. I have not seen Japanese honeysuckle actually do that well, here in Florida. But this native, it's just gorgeous and, pretty easy to grow. Put it on a vine and let it grow. And what are you going to have with those red tubular flowers, Frank?
Definitely popular with the hummingbirds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have daily visits. Ours is right outside the kitchen window, and it's just really fun to watch them zip in and zip out. But yeah, all sorts of pollinators, but especially the hummingbirds, favorite.
Here, now we're going somewhere just like Frank, you know, away from the natives for a second. This croton, now it can be damaged in the cold. So most people have croton in a pot. The good thing is we usually don't get any real frosts or freezes, you know, during the fall months when you want to bring these colors. Look at those colors. Nothing says fall like the colors of the croton, and you mix it up on your porch with some fall decorations, you know, you've got a real great thing going on there, and easy to find, you know, so that's a pretty good thing to bring in, to bring that fall mood to your house. Frank mentioned beautyberry. It's one of our favorites. This is another thing that grows all over the pine, the sand hill area that I live, all over the place. And you're right, I have taken some from the natural areas in my backyard and planted them in the quote, quote, civilized, you know, area around my house. You can make it look nice, like a formal planting. I don't have them cut like a hedge like you showed, but they do grow like small trees. And, you know, I prune them in probably like February or so, you know, I prune them. And they're looking gorgeous like this right now. I'm just in love with them. And to me, they're great because they're like free plants. They grow naturally in the back part of my yard. And it's something I can bring to the front part and not worry about it looking leggy or like, why did you plant weeds here? But yet they grow like a weed. So, you know, it's a win-win situation. Purple lovegrass, we mentioned that. This time of year, take a ride, look on the side of the road, especially in the more drier areas. You'll see this just hues of you know, purple, this like a purple mist on the ground. That's what you'll see. This also grows naturally in the, you know, natural part of my backyard, and something I've incorporated as like a bunch grass in different areas around my house too. And it's great. I was so sad. Yeah, this is my house down here. See, I put it right there with this Yopon holly. I was so sad. I noticed where it normally grows on one of the roads to my house, the county contractors have just been by and just mowed. And I'm like, oh no, what terrible timing. So might not get to see, you know, the hues like I was hoping to, but there'll be in other areas, hopefully. As Frank mentioned, fall is yellow and purple time, which is great for anyone who went to Hernando High School like I did in Brooksville. Their colors are purple and gold. So we have the blue flowers of spring, and we have the yellow and the purple flowers of fall. And, you know, he's right. I hadn't thought about that it's just the last hurrah, like, whoa, I'm going to show you these bright yellow colors. You know, pollinators, come do your thing. So this Liatris and Blazing Star grows naturally. And it's a great addition to any butterfly garden, anything like that. We'll quickly go through some annuals here, changing gears a bit, so that when I talk about annuals, a lot of people do like to, you know, have at least a small area or an area of pots to bring in some annuals. We certainly don't recommend a whole yard full of annuals, because that's a lot of work for you. That's a lot of expense for you. And that's a large carbon footprint that you're putting out. You know, but if you choose an area, if you say, I just want an area to be able to play with, change with the seasons. So either your patio with some pots or a small bed in front of the house, designate that this is my annual switch out with the season area. And then, you know, you can have fun, these different annuals. And some of these annuals will turn into perennials, maybe for at least a year or two, and surprise you with that. So lion's ear is going to bring nice orange colors for you. Orange red, summer through winter. Calendula, pot marigold, you know, brings those nice yellow colors, looks great in a pot as well. It does any of these that you're going to be putting in pots, you got to remember to keep watered as well. Celosia is going to do pretty well, and you can, this goes through the summer as well, but mix and match those colors and even pretend, you know, those are little trees. If you looked at it just right, you can pretend that's like a forest of different color fall trees. Got to have mums. I mean, it's just the thing for fall, isn't it? A nice mums in a pot or in a basket looking situation. They are great container plants. Just remember, garden mums are hardier than florist mums. Delphinium, something we don't think that much about, but you know, bringing that nice purple color, also known as larkspur. Be careful if you have pets or children that like to taste plants, even keep those away from them. And if you get the Carolina larkspur, that one is native to Florida. Hollyhocks. A lot of you may be used to this in the summer up north. It's a cool season annual for us. You do need to stake them up, that they can get to be 2 to 3 feet. But they're usually a lot of fun to plant with kids, you know, to watch them grow, bring in all different kind of colors there. Nasturtium, again, you know, people are used to seeing these in the summer up north. We can grow a lot of the same things, just at different timing. So it's, you know, a nice climber for you to put up on your porch, somewhere like that. But that orange color is really going to say fall for you. And here, these are going to last you all winter. Pansies and petunias will last you all winter long, and you can play with so many different varieties. And I have never seen it get cold enough in Florida to bother any pansies or petunias. So that's something to think about when maybe your neighbors get everything all frozen out and everything is kind of hay colored. You got some pansies and petunias, you might have like the only color on the block. So that's neat to think about. But by April or May, gonna get leggy, they're gonna get blah. You know, they are definitely cool season annuals. Same thing with snapdragons. Bring in the snapdragons for those different colors during our fall and winter time. Here's some things you can do in your landscape in the fall. You can, as we mentioned, play with containers. And here's just a very, very, very fast, you can decorate your container however you choose to, but some of the professional tips, like you'll see florist shops or something like that, you're looking for 3 things: thrillers, fillers, and spillers. So here, you know, our thriller is probably this croton with these nice fall plants, but then you always have something standing upright. So that it's kind of a combination. Is this the filler? Is this the thriller? I guess it depends on your point of view, because this could also be the thriller, the one that stands upright. And I'm not even sure. I don't know. Frank, do you know what this little filler and spiller plant is here?
I'm not 100% sure. It almost looks a little bit like some sort of trailing lantana or something, but I don't really know for certain. It's hard to say.
Well, we're just using it for design purposes. So if you have your upright and then something to fill in and then something that spills out, those are, you can play with all different kind of plants, but that's kind of basic design. Another thing, since I'm with the water department, that I do have to remind you is that, you know, when you set your clocks back on November 7th, well, you know, you always get your reminder to check the batteries in your smoke alarms. We want you to remember, if you use an automated irrigation system, fix that clock on that irrigation system as well. We don't want you to get in trouble for watering at the wrong time. Let me just throw in there, if you live in Hernando County, these are our watering days. We are under 1 week, 1 day a week watering restrictions, always. These aren't going to change. This is just how it is. So if your address ends in 1, your day to water would be Monday before 8 a.m. or after 6 p.m. And here's the thing we've really been talking about too, even if you have a private well, that applies to you. Frank, can you tell us for a second, how much should we be watering? How much really in the fall, in your opinion?
Well, I was going to throw in really quickly that Pasco County's watering restrictions are similar to Hernando's. You can find those on Pasco County's website as well. So if you're living in Pasco, you can check out what your watering days are. And yeah, for the most part, you're on 1 day a week. And the reason is, honestly, University of Florida research has shown that in Central Florida, even if you have turf, if it's right plant, right place that you're following, 1 day a week is generally sufficient for pretty much anything you might be trying to grow in your landscape, with very few exceptions. So that is why, we say that the watering day is when you can water. It's not that you need to water on your watering day. So there are points where you may not need to actually water on a weekly basis. Let your plants guide you in some of that. And yeah, as we get into the winter months, as your grass starts to slow down, I like to say, if you're mowing less, it's growing less. You can kind of pay attention to the cues that your lawn is giving you on whether or not it needs the water, or your other landscape plants. We do sometimes need the water during the fall because the rain stops giving us that extra help and the humidity drops and things like that. So yeah.
Right, and I like that. If you're mowing less, it's growing less. And why is it growing less? When it's still pretty warm out.
Full circle right back to the beginning, because the daylight is dropping. I've already noticed that my lawn is growing less, and I'm out there a little bit less frequently with desperation to catch up with it all. So yeah.
And once we get into full-on winter, skip a week. You don't have to water just because it's your day to water.
Particularly because we start getting those cool season cold fronts coming through and bringing that periodic rain. Things like soil moisture sensors, rain sensors can absolutely help take some of that guesswork out of there. Check in with us. We can give you all sorts of tips on how to optimize so that you're putting water where it's needed, when it's needed, and you're skipping out when you don't, because that can help save you water, save you money, and save your landscape some of the stress of being yanked around on a watering roller coaster. So yeah. Now, I did think of a pro tip for landscape tips as we're going through these. So I'll give you a chance to keep going through these and see if it's something that you jump into, and then I'll.
Well, when Frank mentioned, let your landscape tell you when to water, how your lawn is going to tell you. Yes, is these blades. If over 50% of your lawn, the blades kind of do this, they fold in half. It's trying to conserve water, not photosynthesize as much. That doesn't mean it's time to panic and throw water at it. That just means your next watering day, it doesn't rain in between, go ahead and give it water. Same thing as if you walk across and you see, like these footprints are remaining there. It's losing elasticity, it's dehydrated. Same thing, if it doesn't rain before it's your watering day, that's your lawn talking to you saying, can do with some water. If it's not doing these things, then your lawn is doing fine. Yes,
now, I do always like to throw in the caveat, the best time to check this is earlier in the day, because sometimes even when there's sufficient water in the soil, just as a defense mechanism, because the intensity of the sun is so great, we will get the grass closing up those blades sometimes, even when we've had plenty of rain or plenty of irrigation. And so you want to make sure you're not misinterpreting signs of your plants hiding from the sun and trying to protect from heat stress versus drought stress. And sometimes the two can look similar, but if you check in the morning, you're going to see your plants wide open and happy. And in the afternoon, they'll be curled up, or some of your plants droop. And I've seen a lot of well-intentioned watering happen because a plant is looking droopy in the middle of an afternoon when we've already had 6 inches of rain that week, and you're not doing anything any favors. Your plant is not thirsty. It's a similar response, because there's only so many ways a plant can try to hide or
I call
protect
those
itself.
plants the divas, the impatiens, the azaleas, and I always say, you know, if they're looking like they're dying in the hot afternoons, say, okay, diva, talk to me in the morning and see what they look like in the morning. So it makes perfect sense that your lawn would be included in the diva plants, because it certainly can be. Okay, so I think we've covered quite a bit in this program to help you appreciate Florida fall. And, you know, enjoy your mountain time if you have some vacation, you know, to go up, you know, be happy with what nature has given us, no matter where we are. But we know we're here in Florida, and so, you know, learn to love it and to appreciate it for what it is, and how to bring those nice fall colors in. I thank you very much, Frank, for joining me today, because you always bring so much to the program. Again, my email is LillyB@hernandocounty.us. If you have any questions for Frank, you can go ahead and email me, and I will just forward them on to him.
That works. And
All right.
I will say, for anybody who has hung on all the way to the very end, I'm going to give you a final little pro tip that I really enjoy for the fall and winter season. And that is the pine straw bales that are increasingly available for using as mulch make really great fall and winter prop decorations, similar to how you use you know, straw bales and things like that elsewhere. They're honestly, in some cases, easier to find here in Florida. The pine straw bales, they make great decorations, and then you can spread them out and
Yes,
remulch
okay.
some of your landscape beds, give a
And you
little bit
can
of
use
a
them.
seasonal piney kind of feel and smell. And they make great winter protection too. So if you do get that frost coming through and you've got your tender veggie starts or your perennials or annuals that you're trying to protect, spread a little blanket of pine straw mulch over it, which you've got on hand because you used it as a decoration. And yeah, that's your pro tip life hack of the day. So,
that's a great idea. All right, thank you, Frank, and thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you again next week.